They didn't enroll in this school just like that. Every parent knew that the most promising children were taught here, and the education system itself was strictly classified. Promises of high results overshadowed any criticism, but there were sometimes rumors among parents. For example, that there is a special behavior improvement program at school. Children were forced to participate in strange exercises, and on certain days sounds came from the building that had nothing to do with the educational process. A student named Lauren, the daughter of ordinary postal workers, came to this school as a rare exception. Her parents were offered an incredible discount, explaining that it was an initiative for gifted children from the middle class. Lauren enthusiastically accepted the offer, seeing it as a chance to change her life. Her parents did not ask unnecessary questions, despite the strange requirements of the contract: no calls to a mobile phone, constant wearing of school uniforms even outside of classes, and mandatory residence in a dormitory. From the very first days, Lauren noticed that the school was different from the usual one. Her building was sterile and the smell of disinfection was reminiscent of a hospital. The students barely communicated with each other. Everyone was immersed in textbooks or doing tasks on tablets that tracked every finger movement. There were cameras in every corner, even in the dorm. But Lauren didn't think much of it until one day she noticed that she was being followed. One night, when she went to the bathroom, she heard footsteps in the hallway. Someone was walking too quietly and seemed to be trying not to betray their presence. Peering into the faint light from the window, she noticed a shadow. The figure stood motionless, then slowly moved towards her. Lauren managed to slam the door of her room and lay low. The next day, she tried to tell her neighbors, but they only nodded indifferently. Later, one of them said softly, "Don't ask unnecessary questions. The main thing is not to show that you are afraid." Lauren began to notice oddities everywhere. Some students simply disappeared. The teachers replied that they had been transferred to more advanced classes, but no one had seen them return. Guards in police-like uniforms stood at the entrance to the school and muttered something into a walkie-talkie, looking at the monitor screen every time someone passed by. In the third week of school, Lauren decided to find answers. She spent the night in the library, rummaging through old documents. Among the pile of books, she came across a list of students, which seemed strange to her. Some of the names were crossed out, and there were numbers in front of them: 3, 2, 1. Then she found an old diary hidden behind a closet. It described the life of one of the students who was at school 10 years ago. The girl wrote that she was forced to participate in psychological tests, where it was impossible to make mistakes. Any mistake entailed a correction. The last entries of the diary were torn out. Lauren returned to her room with her diary, feeling her heart pounding. She couldn't help but think that the school was hiding something creepy. She decided she had to find out more. The next day, pretending to be ill, she stayed in her room to carefully study the diary. Each page revealed horrifying details to her. It turned out that the mysterious improvement program was something much darker. The students were subjected not just to psychological tests, but to something like experiments. One of the entries read, "We were locked in a windowless room. They said that only one of us could come out. The rest will stay." We didn't realize what that meant until they took out the knife. My hands are still shaking, even though it's been 2 days. I did what I needed to do, but I don't know how to look in the mirror now. Lauren felt a wave of horror sweep over her. It was not just a diary, but a confession written in a trembling hand. But why didn't anyone talk about it? Why did parents keep sending their children here? That evening, Lauren tried to share her discoveries with her classmates. She showed the diary to one of the girls, Madison, who seemed to be the only one she could trust. But Madison turned pale and quickly returned it without saying a word. Later that night, Lauren heard strange noises in the hallway. Her door opened and Madison appeared on the threshold. You need to leave. They know you found it. If you stay, they'll make you. Her voice broke and she ran away. But how to leave this school if the exits were closed? Lauren remembered that in the backyard of the school, behind the gym, there is an old door leading to the technical rooms. She decided to try to get to her. When Lauren went out into the hallway, she realized that something was wrong. There was a strange tension in the air, as if someone was watching her. She tried to walk quietly, but the footsteps seemed to echo in the void. When she reached the gym, she heard muffled voices. Hiding behind a cabinet with balls, Lauren cautiously peeked out. Two men in uniforms that looked like guards were discussing something. This girl is Lauren. She knows too much. If she talks, everything could collapse. We can't let her go. As soon as we find her, we'll send her to the doctor. Lauren froze. They were looking for her. She barely made it to the technical door, but there was a surprise waiting for her. The door was locked. She remembered seeing the janitor carrying a bunch of keys. Maybe he had them. The janitor always seemed strange. A middle-aged man with gray hair and a look that seemed to penetrate you. Lauren had always tried to stay away from him, but now she had no choice. She went to his office. The door was ajar, and the creaking of an old radio could be heard from inside. Lauren looked inside and froze. There were pictures of students on the walls. Some of them were crossed out with a red marker. Among them, she recognized her classmates, those who suddenly transferred. There was a box of personal items in the corner. There she noticed tablets, phones and school badges. All this belonged to those who were no longer at school. Lauren almost screamed. She noticed a bunch of keys on the table. Summoning all her courage, she sneaked inside and grabbed them. But, leaving the office, she ran into the janitor himself. His face was contorted with rage. "You shouldn't have come in here," he said, grabbing her hand. He dragged her to the basement of the school, where, as it turned out, the biggest secret was located. There was an entire room filled with monitors monitoring every corner of the building. "Did you think you could find out the truth and leave? No one leaves this school without my permission." Lauren realized that this man was not just a janitor. He was part of something bigger. "Why are you doing this? Stop it," she screamed. The man just grinned. "Children are a resource. Your fears, your emotions, all this feeds what we are building here. And you know too much." Lauren looked around, trying to figure out what kind of terrifying mechanism was behind this school. Monitors on the walls showed every corner of the building, including the students' bedrooms. Some screens displayed empty classes, but others. Lauren noticed something that made her heart beat faster. The camera in the basement, which the janitor glanced at from time to time, showed rows of locked cages. There was a man in each cage. "You're just another attempt," he continued, standing in a threatening pose next to the control panel. "We are looking for those who are willing to do anything for the sake of survival. People who understand that in this world you have to sacrifice others in order to survive yourself." Lauren felt her hands clench into fists. She has to do something. At that moment, the janitor pressed one of the buttons, and an image of her room appeared on the monitor. Her roommates, Carrie and Jessica, were sitting on the bed. Their faces were pale, and their eyes were wandering around, as if they had heard something. "If you're smart, I'll let them live," he said. "You're a monster." Lauren resisted the urge to scream. She couldn't let him continue. Lauren knew that her only chance was to use the keys, which she had managed to hide unnoticed in her pocket. She needed to come up with a plan. "Why are you doing this?" She decided to distract him by talking. "Is this normal for a human?" The man laughed, but there was an ominous note in his laughter. "Is it okay? What is the norm? This whole place was created to remove the weak and leave the strong. You're not the first to realize this." but you may be the first to survive. If you show that you're ready. Ready for what? Lauren felt her voice tremble, even though she was trying to look confident. He nodded at the screen, which now showed an empty room with a metal table. There was a knife on the table and a bound student on the floor, who was desperately trying to free himself. Are you strong enough to prove it? She remembered the pages of the diary she had read that day. These scenes were described there. One of you can come out. These words echoed in her head. Lauren gritted her teeth. She knew that killing was not an option. She had to find another way. I'll do it, she finally said, trying to sound confident. The janitor grinned, clearly pleased with her answer. Good. Then go. When he turned to look at the monitors again, Lauren took advantage of the moment. She abruptly snatched the keys out of her pocket and hit him on the head with a bunch. The man gasped and fell to the floor, but did not lose consciousness. You're going to regret this, he croaked, clutching his head. Lauren jumped out of the room and ran to the basement where the cages were. She opened them one by one, freeing the students. Most of them were too scared to move, but a few people quickly came to their senses and began to help the others. Does anyone know how to get out of here? What is it? She asked, looking back at the exit. One of the students nodded. There is an old tunnel behind the technical room. I saw him when we were brought here. Then let's run, Lauren commanded. When they reached the technical room, Lauren heard the sound of footsteps behind them. The janitor caught up with them. He had a knife in his hand, which he grabbed on the way. You're not going anywhere, he shouted, rushing forward. One of the students, a big guy named Tom, rushed at him, trying to disarm him. A struggle ensued, but the cleaner was faster. The knife flashed in the dim light of the lamp, and Tom collapsed to the floor. Screams echoed down the corridor. Hurry up. Let's go. Lauren shouted, dragging the others towards the tunnel. They finally found the tunnel and started down the narrow stairs. The tunnel was dark and the air was heavy. The footsteps of the janitor could be heard behind him, who did not seem to be going to give up. Lauren bumped into a lever against the wall and, without hesitation, pulled on it. The entrance to the tunnel began to close. Run, she shouted to the others. When the door slammed shut, the sound of footsteps faded behind them. They got out, finding themselves in the woods behind the school. Breathing heavily, Lauren turned around. Lauren walked through the dense forest with the surviving students. Their feet were tangled in the roots, and the faint light of the moon only barely illuminated the path. No one spoke. Everyone was consumed by their pain, fear, and guilt. Especially Lauren. She couldn't get Tom's face out of her mind, his hoarse exhalation before falling. We could have saved him, that obsessive feeling haunted her like a shadow. Suddenly one of the students, a girl named Megan, stopped. We don't know where we're going, she whispered. Any place is better than there, snapped another student, Jake. Maybe, Megan replied, her voice trembling. But don't you notice anything strange? He knew that we would get out through this tunnel. These words made everyone freeze. Lauren remembered how the janitor said that no one will leave. But why didn't he stop them earlier? Why did you let them see this tunnel? You're thinking. Is he on purpose? Lauren asked, feeling the cold creep under her skin. Megan nodded. Maybe. The whole place, the whole school, is some kind of game for him. The thought hung in the air, heavy as concrete. After several hours of wandering, they came to a small house lost among the trees. The light in the window was on, but it didn't seem cozy. Rather, it resembled a distress signal. Maybe there's a phone in there, Jake suggested. Or another psycho, Megan muttered. Lauren, despite her fear, went to the door and knocked. There was no answer. She pressed her ear to the door and heard a strange sound, as if someone was walking on the gravel behind the house. "Someone's out there," she whispered, stepping back. Jake didn't wait. He pushed the door with his shoulder, and it creaked open. There was a mess inside, overturned chairs, broken dishes on the floor, and a smell that made Lauren want to hold her nose. "This is not normal," Megan muttered. Lauren walked deeper into the house. Her gaze fell on an old framed photo. She was wearing a man in a janitor's uniform. "That's him," she breathed, showing the photo to the others. "How is this possible?" Jake grabbed the frame. At that moment, the sound of footsteps came from the room. Everyone froze. Lauren picked up the sharp object closest to her, a broken bottle. A man stood in the doorway. But it wasn't the janitor. His face was alien, but his clothes were the same uniform. "Are you lost?" "What is it?" he asked in a calm voice, tilting his head. "Who are you?" Lauren shouted. The man chuckled. "Someone who wants to help. But help has a price." Lauren felt the adrenaline rush back into her blood. The man took a step forward, but suddenly stopped. His gaze fell on Megan. "You," he said, smiling. "You're a good fit. Let's go." Lauren screamed, rushing forward. But the man was faster. He grabbed Megan's hand, his fingers clenched with such force that the girl screamed. "Let her go." Lauren swung the bottle, but the man just laughed. "You're all part of this game," he said, dragging Megan deeper into the house. The others were left in a stupor while Megan screamed. Lauren knew it was a trap, but she couldn't just walk away. "What now?" Jake asked, his voice trembling. "Maybe," Megan replied, her voice trembling. "But don't you notice anything strange? He knew that we would get out through this tunnel." These words made everyone freeze. Lauren remembered how the janitor said that no one will leave. But why didn't he stop them earlier? Why did you let them see this tunnel? You're thinking. Is he on purpose? Lauren asked, feeling the cold creep under her skin. Megan nodded. Maybe. The whole place, the whole school, is some kind of game for him. The thought hung in the air, heavy as concrete. After several hours of wandering, they came to a small house lost among the trees. The light in the window was on, but it didn't seem cozy. Rather, it resembled a distress signal. "Maybe there's a phone in there," Jake suggested. "Or another psycho," Megan muttered. Lauren, despite her fear, went to the door and knocked. There was no answer. She pressed her ear to the door and heard a strange sound, as if someone was walking on the gravel behind the house. "Someone's out there," she whispered, stepping back. Jake didn't wait. He pushed the door with his shoulder, and it creaked open. There was a mess inside, overturned chairs, broken dishes on the floor, and a smell that made Lauren want to hold her nose. "This is not normal," Megan muttered. Lauren walked deeper into the house, her gaze fell on an old framed photo. She was wearing a man in a janitor's uniform. "That's him," she breathed, showing the photo to the others. "How is this possible?" Jake grabbed the frame. At that moment, the sound of footsteps came from the room. Everyone froze. Lauren picked up the sharp object closest to her, a broken bottle. A man stood in the doorway. But it wasn't the janitor. His face was alien, but his clothes were the same uniform. "Are you lost?" "What is it?" he asked in a calm voice, tilting his head. "Who are you?" Lauren shouted. The man chuckled. "Someone who wants to help. But help has a price." Lauren felt the adrenaline rush back into her blood. The man took a step forward, but suddenly stopped. His gaze fell on Megan. "You," he said, smiling. "You're a good fit. Let's go." Lauren screamed, rushing forward. But the man was faster. He grabbed Megan's hand, his fingers clenched with such force that the girl screamed. "Let her go." Lauren swung the bottle, but the man just laughed. "You're all part of this game," he said, dragging Megan deeper into the house. The others were left in a stupor while Megan screamed. Lauren knew it was a trap, but she couldn't just walk away. "What now?" Jake asked, his voice trembling. "We're going to save her," Lauren replied, although deep down she knew it could cost them their lives. Lauren took a quick look at Jake and the other survivors. Their faces were pale, and the fear in their eyes overwhelmed all confidence. But she knew that if they left now, they would not be able to live with this decision. "We won't leave her," she said firmly, and her voice cut through the silence like a blade. "Are you crazy?" Jake held up his hands. "Don't you see what's going on here? This house is like the school, this whole place is one huge trap. If you're afraid, go ahead," Lauren snapped. "But I won't leave her alone." She took a candle from the table, lit it and moved towards where the man took Megan. Those who remained behind her were whispering, but the footsteps behind her showed that they had decided to follow. The house smelled of damp, rot and something metallic. There were a lot of strange objects scattered on the floor, old toys, books, photographs, but it all looked like someone was collecting other people's things to create the illusion of life. "What kind of place is this anyway?" one of the girls behind whispered. "We'll find out soon enough," Lauren replied glumly. The sounds grew louder. Megan was screaming, her voice was strangled, as if she was being strangled. Lauren pushed open the door that led to the basement. It opened with a long creak. The smell became unbearable, as if the whole room was covered in blood. The faint candlelight illuminated the steps leading down, and at the bottom, the figure of a man standing over Megan tied to a chair. Lauren shouted, holding the candle in front of her. The man turned around, his face lit up by fire. A smile that promised nothing good appeared on his face. "You're always so stupid," he said. "Do you think you can fix it? Look around you. This place has written you off long ago." Lauren took a step down, trying not to look at the dirty stains that covered the stairs. "Why are you doing this?" "What is it?" she asked. The man tilted his head. "Because I can. Because people like you are always ready to believe in salvation until they find out that it requires sacrifices." He walked over to Megan and put his hand on her shoulder. The girl jerked, but couldn't pull away. "You can take her place," he suggested. There was silence for a few seconds. Jake shifted nervously from one foot to the other behind Lauren. "What does that mean?" Lauren asked, trying to buy time. "Very simple," the man pointed at the others. "Some of you are staying. The others are coming. But only one. Your friendship, your principles. Are you willing to sacrifice them for salvation?" Megan sobbed, her face wet with tears. "Don't listen to him. Stop it," she screamed. Lauren looked at the others. No one moved, and there was horror in their eyes. "This is wrong," she said, her voice breaking. "You're just playing with us." The man just shrugged his shoulders. "The choice is yours." Lauren knew this was another trick. But she also knew that if they didn't make a decision, the man would kill Megan, and then the others. Jake stepped forward. "Take me," he said, trying to sound confident. "Jake, no!" Lauren exclaimed, trying to hold him back. "Someone has to finish this," he whispered, pushing her away. The man grinned, his eyes glinting in the candlelight. "Good choice," he said, and without hesitation grabbed Jake's arm. Everything happened quickly. The man led Jake to the side, and as soon as they disappeared through the door, the light in the basement flickered. Lauren rushed to Megan to untie her, her hands shaking with fear. "We have to run," Megan whispered as Lauren removed the last ropes. But as soon as they went upstairs, everything changed. The house was different, the walls were stained with blood, bones lay on the floor, and the school building was visible again outside the windows. "It's impossible," Lauren whispered. "Where's Jake?" Megan asked, her voice breaking. They heard the sound of footsteps outside the door. Lauren turned abruptly to the door, where footsteps were heard. Something snapped inside, my body instinctively tensed, preparing for the worst. Megan clutched her arm, breathing hoarsely. The door slowly opened. Jake was standing in the doorway. His face was cold and calm, but there was no spark left in his eyes. They stared unblinkingly, as if he saw them but didn't recognize them. "Jake?" Lauren called cautiously. He took a step forward, holding a bloody knife in his hand. "We have to stay," his voice was low, but it sounded unnatural. "This is the only way out." "What are you doing?" Megan screamed, hiding behind Lauren. "He's right," the janitor's voice rang out from the darkness. The man appeared behind Jake, putting his hand on his shoulder. He understood what was needed to save himself. "Now it's your turn." Lauren wasted no time grabbing the nearest object, a piece of broken wooden leg from a chair. "You're crazy, Jake." "It's not you," she screamed, holding out her hand to keep him at a distance. But he had already rushed forward, swinging the knife. Lauren dodged, feeling the cold blade almost graze her skin. She hit Jake on the arm with a wooden leg, and the knife fell to the floor. "Megan, run," she shouted. Megan ran for the stairs, but the janitor blocked her way. He grabbed her by the hair, pulled her towards him and forcefully pushed her back into the room. "No one's leaving," he growled. Lauren saw Jake get to his feet. His face contorted as if he was struggling with himself, but then he moved towards her again. "You're not my friend," Lauren whispered, her eyes filling with tears. She picked up the knife that was at her feet, and as he approached, plunged it right into his chest. Jake stopped, his breathing became ragged. "I'm sorry," was all he managed to whisper, falling to his knees. Lauren felt the world freeze around her, but she didn't have time to mourn him. She rushed to Megan, who was screaming, trying to escape from the janitor's arms. "You're going to pay for this," Lauren screamed, stabbing the man in the side with a knife. He screamed in pain as he released Megan. Lauren shouted, grabbing her friend's hand. They flew out of the basement and raced down the corridor, but the building had changed. The stairs were gone, and the doors led to dead ends. "He won't let us leave," screamed Megan. But Lauren kept running until they were at the main entrance. They crashed into the door, knocking it out with all their might. Finally, it gave way, and the girls jumped out. To their surprise, it was already morning outside. The school was left behind, dark and menacing, but they didn't dare look back. They ran until they saw the first passers-by, who looked at them in surprise. When the police arrived at the school, they found an empty building. There was no sign of Jake or the janitor. Lauren and Megan tried to explain what happened, but the records showed that no cleaner had ever been hired. Their stories were recognized as hysteria against the background of their experiences. A few months later, Lauren was sitting at home, flipping through old newspapers. She tried to put that night in the past, but every time she found hints that would not let her rest. There was a note on one of the pages: the missing school staff was found after 20 years. The identity of the killer remains a mystery. Lauren was startled when she saw the photo attached to the article. The janitor was there. She closed her laptop, feeling a cold fear sweep over her. The bell rang in silence. She got up to open the door. A man stood in the doorway with a mop in his hand and a grin on his face. "We're not done yet, are we?"